The Moonstone Ceremony happened only once every decade, a sacred ritual where the Alpha King would choose his Luna from the most powerful bloodlines in the realm. Elara Thorne had been groomed for this moment her entire life, her family's ancient magic making her the perfect candidate. But as she stood in the grand hall of the Obsidian Palace, watching King Daemon's silver eyes sweep across the assembled she-wolves with barely concealed disinterest, she felt the first tremor of wrongness. The mate bond her family promised would snap into place remained silent, and when his gaze finally landed on her, what she saw wasn't recognition, it was dismissal, cold, final, as if she were already a ghost. Elara Thorne had been taught 3 truths since the day she first shifted under the blood moon: that her magic was a gift from the goddess herself, that her destiny was written in starlight, and that she would one day stand beside the Alpha King as his Lunar Queen. She had believed all 3 with the fervent certainty of youth. Now at 23, standing in her family's ancestral manor on the edge of the Silverwood territory, she wondered if belief had been her first mistake. "Hold still," her mother commanded, fingers working through Elara's dark auburn hair with practiced efficiency. Each strand was woven with threads of moon silver, rare, expensive, and utterly necessary for a she-wolf of her station. The metal hummed against her scalp, resonating with the magic that ran through her bloodline like a second pulse. The Thornes were one of the 5 founding families, their magic older than the current kingdom itself. While other wolves relied solely on their beast strength, the Thornes commanded the elements, specifically the wild, untamed power of storms. Elara's grandmother could call lightning from clear skies. Her mother could summon fog thick enough to hide entire battalions. Elara could make it rain. It wasn't much comparatively, a disappointment her family rarely mentioned but never forgot. "The king will be looking for strength tonight," her mother continued, her voice carrying that particular tone that meant the words were a test. Not just physical strength but magical prowess, bloodline purity, the ability to produce heirs who will carry forward the ancient gifts. Elara's reflection stared back at her from the silver-framed mirror, a stranger in ceremonial white, the color of unmated she-wolves. The dress was beautiful, she supposed, if one appreciated being wrapped in expectations. The bodice was fitted with whalebone and enchantment, designed to enhance her figure while restricting her breath. The skirt flowed like water, embedded with tiny crystals that caught the light like stars. She looked like a prize, felt like a sacrifice. "I understand, Mother." The words came automatically, worn smooth by repetition. "Do you?" Her mother's hands stilled, meeting Elara's gaze in the mirror. For a moment, something almost like concern flickered in those storm-grey eyes. "The Moonstone Ceremony isn't just about being chosen, Elara. It's about being worthy of the choice. King Daemon has rejected 17 potential Lunas in the past 5 years. 17 daughters of powerful families, sent home in disgrace. The number hung in the air like a threat. He's waiting for his true mate," Elara said softly. It was what everyone whispered, what the romantics in the kingdom hoped for, that their powerful, terrifying Alpha King was holding out for the goddess's chosen match. Her mother's laugh was sharp as broken glass. "He's waiting for perfection, which amounts to the same thing, and if the mate bond doesn't snap into place tonight, you will make yourself indispensable anyway. Charm, grace, power. Make him see what he would be losing if he let you go." "What if I want to be let go?" The thought came unbidden, treasonous. Elara swallowed it down, buried it deep where her mother's perceptive gaze couldn't find it. "I won't disappoint you," she said instead. The lie tasted like ash. The Obsidian Palace rose from the heart of the capital like a dark crown, its towers piercing the twilight sky. It was built from volcanic glass and shadowstone, materials that absorbed light rather than reflected it. The effect was unsettling, a building that seemed to exist in perpetual dusk, even under the full moon. Elara's family arrived in a carriage pulled by dire wolves, creatures twice the size of normal wolves and far more intelligent. They were a status symbol, a display of wealth and power that made other families whisper and stare. She hated it. The grand hall was already filled with she-wolves and their families when they entered. The air was thick with competing perfumes, expensive and cloying, mixed with the sharper scent of anxiety and ambition. Elara counted 23 other candidates, each one dressed in ceremonial white, each one wearing the same expression of determined hope. They were all beautiful, all powerful, all desperate. "The Thorns have arrived," someone announced, and the crowd parted like water. Elara walked through the gauntlet of stairs with her head high, her mother's hand a vice on her elbow. She recognized faces from previous gatherings: Lady Morgana of the Nightshade Coven, whose poison magic could kill with a touch; Seraphina Blackwood, whose family controlled the Shadow Realm portals; Isadora Silvermane, a pure-blooded alpha female whose strength was legendary. These weren't just rivals, they were predators, and tonight they were all hunting the same prey. The throne room doors opened with a sound like thunder. King Daemon Stormclaw entered, and the temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. He was taller than Elara remembered from the last ceremony she'd attended as a child, easily 6.5 feet of raw, controlled power. His hair was black as midnight, worn long enough to brush his shoulders, and his eyes were the silver of a wolf's gaze, luminous and inhuman. He wore black leather and dark steel, no crown, no ornament. He didn't need them. Power radiated from him like heat from a forge, pressing against every wolf in the room, forcing them to acknowledge his dominance. Elara's wolf whimpered inside her chest, torn between the instinct to submit and the desperate hope that he would be theirs. But as his gaze swept across the assembled she-wolves, Elara felt her hope begin to crack. He looked bored. No, worse than bored. He looked like a man performing a duty he despised, examining livestock he had no intention of purchasing. His eyes passed over Morgana without pause, lingered on Seraphina for a heartbeat before moving on, stopped on Isadora long enough that the she-wolf's family began to smile, then continued as if she were nothing. When his gaze finally reached Elara, she felt the full weight of his attention like a physical blow. For 3 seconds he looked at her. She felt her wolf surge forward, desperate, reaching, and then his eyes moved on. Dismissal, complete and absolute, as if she were already a ghost. Elara's mother's hand tightened on her elbow, nails digging in hard enough to draw blood. A warning, a command: smile, charm, make him see. But King Daemon had already turned away, his attention on the High Priestess who would conduct the ceremony. And Elara stood in her white dress, surrounded by rivals and family expectations, and felt the first cold certainty settle into her bones. She was not going to be chosen, and somehow, beneath the fear of disappointing her family, beneath the shame of public rejection, she felt something else entirely: relief. The Moonstone Ceremony reached its crescendo as midnight approached. Elara stood among the remaining candidates, only 5 she-wolves left from the original 20. Her heart hammered against her ribs, each beat a prayer to the moon goddess for mercy she couldn't name. King Daemon Stormclaw descended the obsidian steps with predatory grace, his massive dire wolf Fenrir padding silently beside him. The beast's silver eyes swept across the candidates with more interest than its master showed. Elara noticed how Daemon's jaw tightened, how his fingers flexed as though fighting invisible chains. "The Moonstone Ceremony has been observed for 3 centuries, High Priestess Moira announced, her voice echoing through the vaulted chamber. Moonlight poured through the crystal dome above, painting everything in ethereal silver. "Tonight, our Alpha King will choose his Lunar Queen, and their bond will strengthen the realm for generations to come." Elara's mother stood in the gallery above, moon-silver gown glittering, face carved from marble expectation. Beside her, Elara's grandmother, the legendary Tempest Thorne who once called down lightning to destroy an invading vampire coven, watched with hawk-like intensity. Daemon stopped before Morgana Nightshade first. The raven-haired beauty smiled, confident and deadly. Her family's poison magic was legendary. Her grandmother had assassinated 3 rival alphas with a single kiss. "Morgana Nightshade," Daemon's voice carried the weight of ancient authority. "Your power is formidable, your bloodline impeccable." He paused, and Elara saw something flicker in his golden eyes, resignation, perhaps, or disgust. "But you are not my mate." Morgana's smile never wavered, though her fingers trembled slightly. She bowed with perfect grace and stepped back. Seraphina Shadowmere was next. Her ability to create portals through shadow had saved countless lives during the Fey Wars. She was brilliant, strategic, beautiful. "Not my mate," Daemon said, barely looking at her. Isadora Ironhide, whose pure alpha strength rivaled Daemon's own, received the same dismissal. Then Lyanna Frostborn, who could freeze entire lakes with a thought. 4 rejections, 4 powerful she-wolves dismissed like servants. That left only Elara. The crowd's whispers rose like wind through dead leaves. Elara felt every eye upon her as Daemon approached. Up close he was overwhelming. 6.5 feet of corded muscle, power radiating from him in waves that made her wolf whimper and press low. His scent hit her, pine smoke, winter storms, and something wild that made her blood sing in ways she didn't understand. But his eyes held nothing but cold assessment. Elara Thorne. He circled her slowly, and she forced herself to stand tall, despite her wolf's instinct to submit. Your family's storm magic shaped the realm's defenses. Your bloodline is beyond reproach. He stopped in front of her, so close she could feel the heat radiating from his skin. Your grandmother called lightning from clear skies. Your mother commands fog that has hidden entire armies. Hope flickered in her chest, fragile, desperate. And you, Daemon continued, his voice dropping to a cruel whisper that somehow carried through the silent chamber, make it drizzle. Laughter rippled through the crowd. Not loud, not overt, just enough to slice through her dignity like silver through flesh. Elara's face burned. Her mother's sharp intake of breath echoed from the gallery. You are dutiful, Daemon said, his tone almost bored now. Obedient, perfectly trained to smile and bow and breathe strong airs. He leaned closer, his breath hot against her ear. But you are not my mate. You are not my equal. You are a pale shadow of your bloodline's former glory. And I will not shackle myself to mediocrity simply because your family demands it. The words struck like physical blows. Elara's vision blurred, her wolf howling in anguish inside her chest. I reject you, Elara Thorne, Daemon announced, stepping back. I reject all of you. The Moonstone Ceremony has failed for the 18th time. There will be no Lunar Queen tonight. The chamber erupted in chaos. Elara stood frozen, unable to process what had happened. 18 ceremonies. 18 failures, and she had been the final humiliation, the weakest candidate saved for last, so her rejection would sting the deepest. High Priestess Moira rushed forward, her ancient face creased with concern. Your Majesty, the realm needs a true Lunar Queen, Daemon snarled, his wolf rising to the surface, making his eyes flash pure gold. Not political pawns dressed in moon silver and false smiles. When the moon goddess sends me my true mate, I will know her. Until then, I rule alone. He turned and strode from the chamber, Fenrir at his heels, leaving devastation in his wake. Elara's legs finally gave out. She sank to her knees on the cold obsidian floor, her carefully arranged hair tumbling loose, her ceremonial gown pooling around her like a shroud. Around her, the other rejected she-wolves fled, their families gathering them up with varying degrees of sympathy and fury. But Elara couldn't move, couldn't breathe. The weight of her mother's disappointment pressed down from above like a physical force. Get up, her mother's voice cut through the chaos, sharp as broken glass. Get up, Elara. You will not shame us further by groveling on the floor. Elara looked up to find her mother standing over her, face white with rage, grandmother beside her with an unreadable expression. Elara's voice cracked. I'm sorry, Sorry? Her mother's laugh was bitter. You are the first Thorne in 300 years to be publicly rejected. Do you understand what you've done? The alliances we've lost, the humiliation you've brought upon our family. Something inside Elara cracked. Not her heart. That had already shattered. Something deeper. Something that had been straining against invisible bonds for 23 years. As her mother's tirade continued, as the remaining crowd whispered and stared, Elara felt it. A tremor deep in her chest, a stirring of power she'd never accessed before. The air grew heavy with moisture. Thunder rumbled in the distance, though the sky had been clear moments ago. Her grandmother's eyes widened. Elara! But Elara was already running. She gathered her skirts and fled the obsidian palace, her mother's shouts echoing behind her. She ran through the moonlit gardens, past the shocked guards, through the palace gates, and into the forest beyond. She ran until her lungs burned and her feet bled, until the sounds of the palace faded into darkness and wild silence, and above her the clear night sky opened up and wept. Not a drizzle, a storm. Elara ran until the manicured palace grounds gave way to true wilderness. Ancient pines towered overhead, their branches blocking the moonlight, turning the forest into a labyrinth of shadows and silver. Her ceremonial gown, worth more than most wolves earned in a year, caught on thorns and low branches, tearing with each desperate step. The storm followed her. Rain lashed through the canopy, soaking her to the bone. Thunder cracked overhead, and lightning illuminated the forest in stark white flashes. This wasn't her usual gentle rain. This was fury given form, power she'd never accessed before pouring from her in uncontrolled waves. She finally collapsed against a massive oak, its trunk wider than 3 wolves standing shoulder to shoulder. Her lungs burned. Her feet screamed in agony. The delicate slippers she'd worn for the ceremony had disintegrated miles ago, leaving her barefoot and bleeding. "Impressive display," a voice said from the darkness. Elara's head snapped up, her wolf surging forward defensively despite her exhaustion. A figure emerged from the shadows, a woman who seemed to be carved from the forest itself. She wore robes of deep green and brown, her silver hair braided with living vines and small white flowers that glowed faintly in the darkness. Her eyes were ancient, the pale green of new leaves, and they saw far too much. "Who?" Elara's voice came out as a rasp. "Thalia Wildroot," the woman said, moving closer with the fluid grace of someone who'd walked these woods for centuries. "Keeper of the old ways, guardian of the Thornwood sanctuary." She tilted her head, studying Elara with unnerving intensity. "And apparently your refuge for the evening." "I don't need—" Elara started to protest, but her body chose that moment to betray her. She swayed, darkness creeping at the edges of her vision. Thalia caught her before she hit the ground. Despite her apparent age, the woman's strength was absolute. "Pride is a luxury, child. Right now you need shelter, healing, and truth. I can provide all 3 if you're brave enough to accept them." Elara wanted to refuse, wanted to prove she could survive alone, that she didn't need anyone's help or pity, but as another wave of dizziness washed over her, she found herself nodding weakly. Thalia's sanctuary was unlike anything Elara had seen. They walked for what felt like hours, but might have been minutes. Time moved strangely in the deep forest. Eventually they emerged into a clearing where an ancient stone cottage stood, covered in climbing roses that bloomed despite the season. Warm light glowed from the windows, and the air smelled of herbs, wood smoke, and old magic. Inside, the cottage was larger than it should have been. Shelves lined every wall, crammed with books, jars of dried herbs, crystals that pulsed with inner light, and objects Elara couldn't identify. A fire crackled in the hearth, and a massive grey wolf, nearly as large as Demon's Fenrir, lay before it, watching Elara with intelligent amber eyes. "That's Ash," Thalia said, guiding Elara to a chair by the fire. "He's harmless unless you threaten me. Then he's decidedly not harmless." Elara sank into the chair, her body trembling with exhaustion and shock. Thalia moved through the cottage with practiced efficiency, gathering supplies. She returned with a basin of warm water infused with herbs that smelled of lavender and something sharper, more medicinal. "Your feet first," Thalia said, kneeling before Elara and beginning to clean the wounds with surprising gentleness. "Then we'll address the storm you're still calling down on my roof." Elara looked up, startled. She'd been so focused on her pain and humiliation that she hadn't noticed. The rain still pounded overhead, responding to her turbulent emotions. "I don't know how to stop it," she admitted, shame coloring her voice. It's never been this strong before, because you've never been this angry before," Thalia said matter-of-factly. She wrapped Elara's feet in soft bandages infused with healing salve that immediately dulled the pain. "You've spent your entire life dampening your power, making yourself smaller, weaker, more acceptable. Tonight that dam broke." "I'm not angry," Elara protested automatically. "I'm just disappointed. Humiliated." Thalia's laugh was sharp as breaking ice. "Child, you're furious. At the Alpha King for his cruelty, at your mother for her impossible expectations, at the moon goddess for this entire farce, and most of all, at yourself, for caring what any of them think." The words struck something deep inside Elara. The storm overhead intensified, rain hammering the roof like fists. "There it is," Thalia said with satisfaction. She stood, moving to a shelf and selecting a leather-bound journal, so old the pages had yellowed to parchment. "Do you know what you are, Elara Thorne?" "A failure," Elara whispered. "A disappointment to my bloodline." "No." Thalia opened the journal, her fingers tracing lines of text written in an ancient script. "You are a Stormcaller, not a weather witch like your mother, not a lightning bringer like your grandmother. Something older, something your family has forgotten how to recognize. She turned the journal toward Elara. The page showed an illustration of a woman standing in the center of a hurricane, arms raised, power radiating from her in visible waves. The text was in Old Lupine, but Elara could make out enough to understand the Stormcaller commands not just rain or lightning, but the fury of the tempest itself. Her power is not gentle, it is not decorative, it is the rage of nature given voice. That's not possible, Elara breathed. Stormcallers died out centuries ago. They were too dangerous, too unstable. The bloodlines bred the trait out deliberately. Did they? Thalia's smile was knowing. Or did they simply teach their daughters to suppress it, to channel it into acceptable, controllable forms? Your grandmother's lightning is impressive, certainly, but it's focused, refined, limited. Your mother's fog is useful tactically, but it's defensive, passive. She closed the journal. Your power, Elara, is neither. It's raw, primal, and if you learn to control it, it will make you the most powerful storm witch in 3 centuries. Elara's hands shook. I don't want power. I just want... What? Thalia challenged. To go back to the palace? To apologize to your mother? To spend the rest of your life trying to become someone worthy of a mate who looked at you like you were nothing? No. The word came out stronger than Elara expected. She looked up, meeting Thalia's ancient eyes. No, I don't want that. Then what do you want? For the first time in her life, Elara let herself consider the question honestly. Not what her mother wanted. Not what her family expected. Not what tradition demanded. What did she want? I want to be free, she whispered. I want to be strong enough that no one can ever make me feel that small again. I want... She paused, the truth rising up from somewhere deep and long buried. I want to matter, not because of my bloodline or my family name, but because of who I am. Thalia's smile transformed her face, making her look simultaneously younger and infinitely older. Good. That's a beginning. She moved to the fire, adding herbs that made the flames burn blue and green. Your family will come looking for you. Your mother will demand you return. The Alpha King's rejection has political consequences that will ripple through the realm. I know, Elara said quietly, but you don't have to go back. Not yet. Not until you're ready. Thalia turned, her expression serious. I can teach you, Elara. I can show you what you truly are. Help you access the power your family has spent generations suppressing, but it won't be easy. It will hurt. You'll have to break yourself down and rebuild from the foundation up. Elara thought of her mother's disappointed face, of Demon's cruel dismissal, of 23 years spent trying to be perfect, acceptable, enough. When do we start? She asked. Thalia's grin was fierce. We already have. Outside, the storm began to calm. Not because Elara was suppressing it, but because she was finally truly beginning to take control. Above the cottage, the clouds parted just enough to reveal the full moon, and for a moment, Elara could have sworn she heard the moon goddess laugh, not in mockery but in approval. 3 months in the Thornwood sanctuary transformed Elara in ways she'd never imagined possible. Each dawn, Thalia woke her before sunrise to train. Not the delicate, decorative magic her mother had taught. Controlled drizzles for garden parties, gentle mists to enhance moonlit ceremonies. No, Thalia pushed her to embrace the chaos within, to stop apologizing for her power and start wielding it. Storm magic isn't about control, Thalia had said during their first lesson, standing in the clearing as Elara called rain from a cloudless sky. It's about partnership. You don't command the storm, you become it. The training was brutal. Elara learned to summon lightning without her grandmother's careful precision, letting it arc wild and devastating across the sky. She discovered she could pull moisture from the air itself, creating fog so thick it was nearly solid, or condensing it into ice that formed deadly spears. She found that her emotions, the anger, the hurt, the fierce joy of finally being herself, fueled her power in ways that calm detachment never could. But Thalia taught her more than magic. She introduced Elara to others who'd found refuge in the Thornwood, wolves who'd been exiled, rejected, or who'd simply walked away from the rigid hierarchies of pack life. There was Kieran, a warrior who'd refused an alpha's direct order and been cast out. Lyra, a healer whose unconventional methods had been deemed heretical. Marcus, a scholar who'd questioned the council's interpretation of ancient law. They welcomed Elara without judgment, valued her for her growing strength and sharp mind rather than her bloodline. For the first time in her life, she felt like she belonged somewhere, not because of her family name, but because of who she was becoming. Still, news from the outside world filtered in. Her mother had declared her temporarily indisposed to save face. The Alpha King's continued refusal to choose a Lunar Queen had created political instability. 3 border pacts had challenged his authority, and vampire covens were testing the realm's defenses. The council pressured Daemon constantly, but he remained unmoved, his wolf reportedly growing more restless and aggressive with each passing week. Elara told herself she didn't care. That Daemon Stormclaw and his problems were no longer her concern. She was lying. The invitation arrived on a morning when frost painted the forest silver. A raven landed on Thalia's windowsill, carrying a scroll sealed with the Obsidian Palace's mark. Elara's hands trembled as she broke the seal. The winter solstice gathering. All wolves of noble blood are commanded to attend, by order of the Alpha King and the High Council. You don't have to go, Thalia said quietly, watching Elara's face. Yes, I do. Elara looked up, and her eyes held a new fire. I've spent 3 months hiding in the forest, becoming stronger, but what's the point if I'm too afraid to face them? Thalia's smile was proud. Then we'd better make sure you arrive in style. The winter solstice gathering was held in the Obsidian Palace's grand ballroom, the same chamber where Elara had been humiliated. As her carriage approached, drawn by 2 white wolves Thalia had somehow procured, Elara felt her stomach twist with anxiety. But she wasn't the same she-wolf who'd fled this place in tears. She'd chosen her gown carefully, deep midnight blue that shifted to storm grey in the light, with silver embroidery that resembled lightning strikes. Her hair fell loose down her back in waves, crowned with a circlet of moonstone and silver that Thalia had given her, an ancient piece that marked her as a student of the old ways. She wore no family colours, no thorn insignia. Tonight, she represented only herself. The ballroom fell silent as she entered. Elara walked with her head high, feeling every eye upon her. She spotted her mother near the council's table, face frozen in shock. Her grandmother stood beside her, and for just a moment Elara saw something like approval in those ancient eyes. The other rejected she-wolves were present too. Morgana Nightshade watched with calculating interest. Seraphina Shadowmere offered a small, respectful nod. Even Isadora Ironhide, who'd initially mocked Elara's weak magic, looked at her with new wariness, because they could all feel it, the power radiating from Elara like heat from a forge. The air around her was charged with potential energy, making the fine hairs on everyone's arms stand on end. This was no longer the timid girl who'd made it drizzle. This was a storm barely contained in human form. Elara Thorne, High Priestess Moira, approached, her expression unreadable. We'd heard you were recovering. It's good to see you well. I'm better than well, High Priestess, Elara said smoothly. I'm finally awake. Before Moira could respond, a ripple of power swept through the room, so intense that several wolves gasped and took involuntary steps back. Elara turned, her heart suddenly pounding, and saw him. Alpha King Daemon Stormclaw stood at the top of the grand staircase, and he looked terrible. His face was gaunt, shadows under his eyes suggesting weeks of poor sleep. His wolf was barely leashed, visible in the gold glow of his eyes and the tension in every line of his body. Fenrir stood beside him, the massive dire wolf's ears flat against his skull, a low growl rumbling in his chest. But it was Daemon's expression that stopped Elara's breath. He was scanning the crowd with barely concealed desperation, his nostrils flaring as though searching for a particular scent. His gaze swept past her once, twice, then locked on her with the force of a physical blow. Elara felt it then. A snap, a click, a sensation like a key turning in a lock she hadn't known existed. The mate bond, the sacred connection that should have formed during the Moonstone Ceremony, suddenly blazed to life between them, so powerful it drove her back a step. Daemon's face went white, then red. His hands gripped the staircase railing so hard, the stone cracked beneath his fingers. "No," he whispered, but his voice carried through the silent ballroom. "No, that's not possible." Elara's wolf surged forward, recognizing her mate, wanting to go to him. But Elara held firm, remembering his words. "You are a pale shadow of your bloodline's former glory, and I will not shackle myself to mediocrity." "Your Majesty," she said, her voice steady despite the chaos inside her. She offered the shallowest curtsy protocol allowed, barely more than a nod. "How unexpected to see you at your own gathering." Daemon descended the stairs like a man in a trance, his eyes never leaving her face. The crowd parted before him, wolves pressing back against the walls to give him space. He stopped 3 feet away, close enough that Elara could smell his scent. And it was wrong. Not the pine and winter storms she remembered, but something bitter, almost sour. The scent of a wolf whose mate bond had been rejected, whose wolf was slowly going mad from the denial. "You," Daemon said hoarsely. "It's you. It's been you this entire time." "I'm afraid I don't understand, Your Majesty," Elara said coolly, though her heart was racing. "You made your feelings about me quite clear 3 months ago." "I didn't—" He reached for her, and Elara took a deliberate step back. Daemon flinched as though she'd struck him. "The bond. I couldn't feel it during the ceremony. You were suppressing your power so completely that your true scent was hidden. But now I'm no longer trying to be someone I'm not," Elara finished. She met his eyes steadily, refusing to look away. "Now I'm exactly what you said I wasn't. Your equal." Thunder rumbled overhead, though the sky had been clear moments ago. The chandeliers swayed, crystals chiming like warning bells. "Elara, please!" Daemon's voice cracked. "I was wrong. I was cruel. I've been searching for you for 3 months. My wolf has been suffering." Elara's laugh was sharp. "Good. Perhaps now you understand how it feels to be publicly humiliated, to be told you're not enough, to be rejected by the one person fate chose for you." She turned to walk away, but Daemon moved with alpha speed, blocking her path. He didn't touch her, seemed to understand that would be a mistake, but his presence was overwhelming. "I reject your rejection," he said desperately. "The mate bond is sacred. You can't just— Can't I?" Elara's eyes flashed and lightning struck outside, so close the thunder was instantaneous. "You rejected me first, Daemon Stormclaw. You looked at me and saw nothing worth claiming. Well, I've spent 3 months learning to see my own worth, and I've decided that maybe, just maybe, you're not worthy of me." The ballroom erupted in shocked whispers. No one spoke to the Alpha King like that. No one. Daemon's wolf surged forward, making his eyes burn pure gold. For a moment, Elara thought he might try to force the bond, use his alpha authority to compel her submission. Instead, he did something she never expected. He dropped to one knee before her, in front of the entire court, and bowed his head. "You're right," he said, his voice carrying through the silent room. "I don't deserve you. I was blind, arrogant, and cruel. I rejected the greatest gift the moon goddess could have given me because I was too foolish to see past my own expectations." He looked up, and his eyes were raw with emotion. "But I'm begging you, Elara. Give me a chance to prove I can be better. Let me earn what I so carelessly threw away." Elara's breath caught. Every instinct screamed at her to accept, to complete the bond, to ease both their suffering. But she'd spent 3 months learning to be strong, learning that she deserved more than scraps and apologies. "No," she said softly. "Not yet. You want me to forgive you? Then prove you've changed. Prove you see me as more than a political necessity or a mate bond obligation. Prove that you value me, not the power I can give you, not the airs I could bear, but me." She stepped around him, walking toward the ballroom doors with her head high. Behind her she heard Daemon's sharp intake of breath, felt the mate bond stretching between them like a living thing. At the doorway she paused and looked back. Daemon still knelt where she'd left him, looking lost and broken. Around him, the court watched in stunned silence. "When you figure out how to do that," Elara said, "you know where to find me." Then she walked out into the winter night, leaving the Alpha King kneeling in her wake, and felt more powerful than she ever had in her life. The weeks following the winter solstice gathering were unlike anything Elara had experienced. News of her rejection of the Alpha King spread through the realm like wildfire. Some called her brave, others foolish, but everyone agreed she'd done the impossible. She'd brought the most powerful Alpha in 3 centuries to his knees. Back at Thornwood Sanctuary, life continued with new purpose. Thalia pushed her training harder, preparing her not just to survive in the paranormal world, but to lead. Elara studied ancient texts on storm magic, learned the politics of pack dynamics, and discovered she had a natural talent for strategy that her mother's focus on etiquette had never allowed her to develop. But the mate bond made everything complicated. She felt Daemon constantly, a presence at the edge of her consciousness, warm and persistent. She felt his emotions bleeding through: regret, determination, longing, and underneath it all, a bone-deep ache that mirrored her own. The bond wanted completion. Their wolves wanted unity. But Elara held firm even when it hurt. The gifts started arriving after the first week. Not jewels or gowns. Demon was learning. Instead, he sent books on storm magic from the royal archives, some so rare Thalia gasped when she saw them. He sent word that he'd pardoned Kieran, officially lifting his exile and restoring his honor. He established a scholarship for wolves from minor families to study at the palace, dismantling the rigid hierarchy that had made Elara feel inadequate her entire life. Each gift came with a note in his own hand, never begging, never demanding, just explaining. I'm trying to be better, not for the realm, not for the council, for you. Elara kept the notes in a wooden box by her bed and told herself she wasn't softening. She was lying again. The confrontation with her mother came on a grey morning, when frost still clung to the windows. Elara was practicing in the clearing, calling down snow, a new skill she'd only recently mastered, when she felt the familiar presence approaching through the trees. Tempest Thorne emerged first, her grandmother's silver hair braided in the traditional warrior style. Behind her came Elara's mother, Celeste, looking older than Elara remembered. Thalia stood at the cottage door, arms crossed, clearly prepared to intervene if necessary. "Grandmother," Elara said carefully, letting the snow dissipate. "Mother, this is unexpected." "Is it?" Tempest's voice was dry. "You reject the Alpha King publicly, throw the realm into political chaos and think we wouldn't come. I thought you'd send guards to drag me back," Elara admitted. "We considered it," Celeste said sharply. Then her face crumpled slightly. "Elara, what are you doing? Do you understand what you've thrown away? The Alpha King himself is courting you and you're hiding in the forest like a rogue wolf." "I'm not hiding," Elara said quietly. "I'm learning who I am without you telling me who I should be." Celeste flinched as though struck. "I only ever wanted what was best for the family, I know." Elara took a breath, choosing her words carefully. "But what about what was best for me, Mother? Did you ever ask what I wanted, what I dreamed about? Or was I always just a piece on your political game board?" "That's not fair," Celeste protested, but her voice lacked conviction. "Isn't it?" Elara felt the old anger rising, but also something new, understanding. "You raised me to be perfect, to never make mistakes, to always put the family first. And when I failed, when the Alpha King rejected me, you couldn't even comfort me. You could only think about the alliances we'd lost." Tears streamed down Celeste's face now. "I didn't know how to comfort you. I was raised the same way, Elara. Perfection or nothing, strength or weakness. I thought I was preparing you for the world." "You were preparing me to be miserable," Elara said, but her voice was gentler now. "Just like you've been miserable, trying to live up to grandmother's legacy." Tempest made a sound, half laugh, half sob. Both women turned to stare at her. "She's right, Celeste," Tempest said, her ancient eyes bright with unshed tears. "I did to you what you did to her. I pushed you to be strong, to be perfect, to never show weakness, and I created a daughter who couldn't show love because she'd forgotten how to feel it." The clearing fell silent except for the wind through the pines. "I called down lightning once," Tempest continued, moving closer to Elara. "Destroyed an entire vampire coven to protect our pack. Everyone celebrated my power, my strength. But do you know what I remember most about that day?" She reached out, touching Elara's cheek with surprising tenderness. "How terrified I was. How the power nearly consumed me. How I wished someone had taught me it was okay to be afraid." She turned to Celeste. "I failed you, daughter. I taught you to be strong, but forgot to teach you to be human. And you passed that wound to Elara." Back to Elara. "But you're breaking the cycle. You're choosing yourself. And that takes more courage than any magic I've ever wielded." Elara's throat tightened. "I'm not trying to hurt the family, grandmother. You're trying to survive," Tempest finished. "And you're doing it beautifully." She glanced at Thalia, who watched from the cottage with approval. "The old ways suit you. Storm magic was always meant to be wild, not domesticated for political convenience." "The council won't see it that way," Celeste said, wiping her eyes. "They're demanding Demon choose a Lunar Queen. If you continue to refuse him, they'll force him to select another." "Let them try," Elara said, and felt her power rise in response to the threat. Storm clouds gathered overhead, responding to her emotions. Demon and I are true mates. The moon goddess herself chose us. If the council thinks they can override her will, they're welcome to face the consequences. Tempest's laugh was fierce and proud. There's the thorn fire. I knew it was in you. They talked for hours after that, really talked perhaps for the first time in Elara's life. Celeste apologized, haltingly at first, then with increasing honesty. She spoke of her own failed dreams, her own compromises, the weight of expectations she'd carried since childhood. Tempest shared stories of the old days, when storm magic was revered and feared in equal measure, before the families had tried to tame it into something acceptable. As the sun began to set, painting the forest in shades of amber and gold, Celeste took Elara's hands. "I can't promise I'll be perfect," she said. "I can't promise I won't worry or try to control things, but I can promise to try, to see you as you are, not as I wanted you to be. That's all I ask," Elara whispered, and pulled her mother into an embrace that felt like forgiveness. When they finally left, Tempest paused at the forest's edge. "The Alpha King is suffering, you know. The rejected mate bond is destroying him slowly. His wolf grows more unstable each day." "I know," Elara said quietly. She felt it through the bond, the constant ache, the growing desperation. "But if I go to him now, out of pity or obligation, we'll both resent it eventually. He needs to prove he wants me for me, not because the bond demands it." "And if he does?" Tempest asked. "If he proves himself worthy?" Elara looked up at the darkening sky, feeling the storm magic humming in her veins, the power she'd finally learned to embrace. "Then maybe I'll let him try to earn what he threw away." That night, Elara sat by the fire and opened the wooden box of Demon's notes. She read through them again, seeing the evolution in his words, from desperate apology to genuine understanding. The most recent note, delivered just that morning, was different from the others. "I don't expect forgiveness, I don't deserve it, but I want you to know I see you now. Not the perfect Lunar Queen the Council wanted, not the obedient daughter your mother raised, not even just my mate. I see Elara, fierce, powerful, brave enough to choose herself when everyone else wanted to choose for her. And I'm in awe. Whatever you decide, know this, you've already changed me. You've changed the realm. You've proven that true strength isn't about never falling. It's about choosing to rise." "Cures if you'll have me." Demon Elara traced the words with her finger, feeling the mate bond pulse warm and steady in her chest. She wasn't ready yet. Not quite. But for the first time since the Moonstone Ceremony, she could imagine a future where she might be. Outside, the storm clouds parted, revealing a sky full of stars and a full moon that seemed to smile down on the Thornwood sanctuary. The moon goddess, it seemed, was patient. And so, Elara decided, was she. 6 months after the winter solstice gathering, Elara stood on the balcony of her new home, a stone manor on the border between Thornwood Sanctuary and the wider realm, and watched the sun rise over the forest. The manor had been a gift from the council, a peace offering after she'd helped negotiate a treaty with the vampire covens that had been testing the realm's borders. Turned out, a Stormcaller who could summon lightning and create impenetrable fog walls was exactly what the realm needed for defense. Who would have thought? She smiled, sipping tea infused with herbs Thalia had sent, and felt the familiar warmth of the mate bond pulse in her chest. Demon was awake, she knew, probably already in his study, working through the mountain of reforms he'd been implementing. True to his word, he'd been proving himself. Not with grand gestures or public declarations, but with consistent, meaningful change. He'd restructured the council to include representatives from minor families. He'd established the Academy of Old Ways, where wolves could study traditional magic without stigma. He'd personally visited every pack in the realm, listening to grievances and addressing injustices that had festered for decades. And he'd courted Elara with patience that must have cost him dearly. They'd started with letters, long, honest conversations about everything from politics to philosophy to their favorite childhood memories. Then carefully supervised meetings, always in public, always with Thalia or another chaperone present. Demon never pushed, never demanded. He simply showed up consistently, proving he valued her mind as much as the mate bond. Slowly, painfully, Elara had begun to trust him. The sound of wings drew her attention. A raven landed on the balcony railing, carrying a small scroll. Elara recognized Demon's seal and felt her heart skip. Even now, after months of correspondence, his messages still affected her. The spring equinox celebration is tonight. I know you've been avoiding palace events, but I'm hoping you'll make an exception. There's something I need to ask you, and I'd prefer to do it properly this time. Also, Fenrir misses you. He's been insufferable. Elara laughed despite herself. She'd grown fond of Daemon's massive dire wolf during their supervised visits. Fenrir had taken to following her around like a puppy, much to his master's exasperation. She looked down at herself. Simple training leathers, hair in a practical braid, no jewelry except the moonstone circlet Thalia had given her. The old Elara would have panicked, would have spent hours preparing to be perfect. The new Elara simply smiled and called for her attendant. "Lyra," she said, when the healer appeared. "I need a dress, something that says I'm here on my own terms and I'm not apologizing for it." Lyra's grin was wicked. "I know exactly the thing." The spring equinox celebration transformed the Obsidian Palace into something magical. Flowers bloomed in impossible profusion, their perfume mixing with the scent of honey wine and roasted meats. Musicians played in every corner, and wolves danced in the great ballroom where Elara had once been humiliated. She arrived fashionably late, wearing a gown of deep emerald green that shifted to silver at the edges, like storm clouds catching sunlight. Her hair fell loose in waves, crowned with fresh flowers and small crystals that sparked with contained lightning. She wore no family colors, no political allegiances, just herself, powerful and unapologetic. The ballroom fell silent as she entered, but this time the silence held respect rather than mockery. Daemon stood at the far end of the room, and when his eyes found her, the mate bond flared so intensely that Elara gasped. He looked different, healthier, stronger, more settled. The shadows under his eyes had faded, and his wolf no longer rode him with desperate intensity. He wore formal black with silver embroidery and a circlet of his own, the Alpha King's crown, simple and elegant. He crossed the room to her, and the crowd parted automatically. When he reached her, he bowed, not the perfunctory nod of a king, but a deep, respectful bow that acknowledged her as an equal. "Elara Thorne," he said, his voice carrying through the silent room. "Thank you for coming." "Your Majesty," she replied, offering a curtsy that was considerably deeper than the one she'd given him 6 months ago. "Progress," she thought with amusement. "Dance with me?" he asked, extending his hand. Elara hesitated only a moment before placing her hand in his. The contact sent electricity through the mate bond, and she saw Daemon's eyes flash gold in response. But he simply led her to the dance floor with careful courtesy. They moved together as though they'd been dancing for years, the mate bond guiding their steps into perfect synchronization. Around them, other couples joined the dance, but Elara was aware only of Daemon, his warmth, his scent, pine and winter storms, clean and right again, the way he looked at her like she was the only wolf in the room. "You've been avoiding me," he said quietly, his lips close to her ear. "I've been busy," Elara countered, "negotiating treaties, training new students at the academy, learning to control a hurricane I accidentally summoned last week." Daemon's laugh was warm and genuine. "I heard about that. The council was impressed, terrified, but impressed. Good, they should be terrified, keeps them honest." They danced in comfortable silence for a moment, before Daemon spoke again, his voice serious now. "Elara, I meant what I said in my letters. You've changed everything. The realm, the council, me. I'm not the same wolf who rejected you." "I know," Elara said softly. "I've been watching. The reforms, the academy, the way you actually listen to wolves instead of just commanding them. You're becoming the king the realm needs." "I'm trying to become the mate you deserve," Daemon corrected. He pulled back slightly, meeting her eyes. "Which brings me to what I wanted to ask you." He led her off the dance floor, through the ballroom, and out onto a balcony that overlooked the palace gardens. The spring night was perfect. Warm breeze, stars overhead, the scent of blooming jasmine. Daemon took both her hands in his, and Elara felt her heart begin to race. "6 months ago I knelt before you and begged for a chance to prove myself," he said. "You told me to prove I valued you. Not your power, not your bloodline, but you. I've spent every day since trying to do that, learning who you are, what you care about, what makes you laugh, and what makes you angry." "Daemon," Elara started, but he shook his head gently. "Let me finish, please." He took a breath. "I've learned that you hate formal dinners but love strategy sessions, that you're brilliant at politics but pretend not to be because it makes people underestimate you, that you sing when you think no one's listening, and you're terrible at it, and it's adorable. that you care deeply about justice and fairness even when it costs you personally, that you're brave enough to stand alone against the entire realm if you believe you're right. Tears pricked Elara's eyes. You've been paying attention. I've been falling in love with you, Daemon said simply, not because the mate bond demands it, but because you're extraordinary. You're everything I didn't know I needed, and everything I don't deserve. He released one of her hands and reached into his jacket, pulling out a small velvet box. When he opened it, Elara's breath caught. Inside was a ring, not the traditional Lunar Queen's crown jewel, but something simpler and infinitely more meaningful. A band of silver and moonstone, engraved with storm patterns and ancient runes. This was my grandmother's, Daemon said quietly. She was a Stormcaller too, before the families bred the trait out. She gave it to my grandfather when she chose him, not because tradition demanded it, but because she wanted to. I'm not asking you to be my Lunar Queen, Elara. I'm asking you to be my partner, my equal, my mate, if you'll have me. He didn't kneel this time. He stood before her as an equal, offering not a command or a demand, but a choice. Elara looked at the ring, at Daemon's face, open and vulnerable in a way she'd never seen from him, and felt the mate bond singing in her chest. She thought of the girl she'd been 6 months ago, desperate for approval, willing to diminish herself to fit someone else's expectations. She thought of the woman she'd become, powerful, confident, unafraid to stand alone. And she realized she didn't have to stand alone anymore, not if she didn't want to. Yes, she whispered, and then louder, yes. Daemon's face transformed with joy. He slipped the ring onto her finger with trembling hands, and the moment it settled into place, the mate bond completed with a snap that sent power cascading through both of them. Lightning struck in the clear sky overhead, and rain began to fall. Not a storm of rage or pain, but a gentle, joyful rain that blessed the palace gardens. Daemon pulled her close and kissed her, and Elara felt everything click into place. The bond, her power, her purpose, her heart. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, she laughed. Your wolf was right to ache for me, she said, grinning. I'm magnificent. Daemon's laugh was pure happiness. You're impossible and perfect. And mine. Ours, Elara corrected, placing her hand over his heart. We're each other's. Partners. Equals. Partners, Daemon agreed, covering her hand with his. Always. Inside the ballroom, the celebration continued, but Elara and Daemon stayed on the balcony, wrapped in each other in the gentle rain, as the moon goddess smiled down on her chosen pair. 3 months later, Elara stood before the council as Lunar Queen, not because tradition demanded it, but because she'd chosen it. She wore her grandmother's ring and her own power with equal pride, and when she spoke, the council listened. She established the Sanctuary Network, offering refuge to wolves who needed to find themselves outside pack hierarchies. She created the Storm Guard, an elite force of weather witches who protected the realm's borders. She rewrote the laws governing mate bonds, ensuring no wolf would ever be forced into a union against their will. And at night, she returned to the home she shared with Daemon, sometimes the palace, sometimes her manor, sometimes Thornwood Sanctuary, and they built a life based on mutual respect, genuine love, and the understanding that true strength came from choosing each other, every day. Morgana Nightshade eventually became ambassador to the vampire covens, her poison magic put to diplomatic use. Seraphina Shadowmere opened a portal network that revolutionized trade. Even Celeste found peace, finally stepping out of her mother's shadow to pursue her own interests in magical theory. As for the Alpha King, who'd once rejected his mate, he learned that the greatest power wasn't dominance or control, but partnership, and he spent the rest of his life grateful that Elara had been brave enough to reject him back, forcing him to become worthy of her. Years later, when their daughter asked how they'd fallen in love, Elara smiled and said, "Your father's eyes scanned the crowd of prospects, but his wolf ached for the one not there. And when I finally showed up, as myself, not who everyone wanted me to be, we both found what we'd been searching for all along." "Each other," their daughter asked. "Ourselves," Elara corrected, "and then each other. Because that, she'd learned, was the secret to true love. You had to be whole on your own before you could be whole together. And they were. Thank you for joining Elara and Daemon on their journey from rejection to redemption, from humiliation to triumph. If you enjoyed this tale of storm magic second chances, and finding the courage to choose yourself, please subscribe for more paranormal romance stories. Leave a comment below telling us where you're listening from and what you'd like to hear next. Share this story with someone who needs to be reminded that true strength comes from embracing who you really are, not who others expect you to be. Until next time, may you always have the courage to stand in your own storm.